Hello, and yet another lecture. I hope that you've been enjoying all these in the process of things. I'm enjoying doing them, so I hope they're all working out by this point in the semester. We sure should know. This is going to be, we split GAP 3 into two groups. So this is the first of the presentations, lectures, if you will, on GAP 3 for the second group. And this is the empowerment and teamwork aspects. So these are causes and solutions for GAP 3 is what we're talking about. Empowerment and teamwork are two of those that go hand in hand. So what we're talking about here is the issue of inappropriate supervisor controls, right? So the cause could be a focus on quantitative based goals versus service. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in our last session when we get into owners versus the management side of things. But it could be based on the financial issues. It might be based on occupancies or average rates or number of covers in the restaurant, whatever it may be. You know, that's more of the focus here. So the solution, observe employee behavior. Okay, now that's part of what we're going to talk about in GAP 3. Shopper research, we've talked about this before back in GAP 2. Customer comments again, and customer complaint analysis, all those were part of GAP 3 as to what we need to be able to research in the process here. Because remember now, we understand what the customer wants, but we're not getting it communicated to the employee effectively. And performance and reward, which is a part of what we're talking about here in terms of the aspects of empowerment and teamwork, for that matter, is performance and how we actually get that to be accomplished. So lack of perceived control issues, lack of ability to choose outcomes and goals. That's the employee, all right? They don't feel that they have the control to be able to do what they need to do. And the solution here is empowerment, and that's the key we're going to talk about. So decision making at the lowest levels, that requires a trust factor here. Authority about making service decisions, replacing service standards and procedures so that we have a system, and we're going to talk about some of those that are in place today with some of the major companies and what they do. And eliminating multiple level approval for problem solving, so we don't have to go to the boss for everything, we don't have to go to the next level, we actually give it to the person who's interfacing, or the boundary spanner, if you will, with the customer themselves. So what happens with empowerment? The benefit, quicker responses, employees feel more responsible, employees tend to interact more, empowered employees is a great source of ideas, and then a word of mouth from customers. Now the drawbacks is it requires more investment in training and selection process, and selection process we've talked about is a key element here. Higher labor costs, because we basically have to hire people who are able to critically think. You all, right? Slower, inconsistent delivery. You know, that could be because we're spending time to learn more about what the customer actually wants, which doesn't seem like a bad thing to me, right? May violate customers' perceptions of fair play because of how decisions are made at whatever level. Maybe they want a manager to make the decision. And there's a fear within the financial aspects that we're going to cost the company money by doing this, and therefore that could be a problem for us. Excuse me. So a traditional organization chart, you may have seen these before, right? You start at the top with a manager. The manager has supervisors below, and then you have frontline employees, and then ultimately the customers. This is a traditional organization chart. When we're talking about empowerment, we have to basically flip the script here. We have to start with the customers on top. Okay, the customer focus is what's most important. And then the frontline employee or the boundary spanner and how well they do. And that communicated back to the supervisors and ultimately to the managers. Now, I'm not saying that the managers aren't going to have to make some decisions in some cases. They certainly are. But there's more potential for the employees to make the right kind of choices and do the right kind of things. And if they don't make the choice that hopefully management was looking for, then you have to do some re-education along the way and so on. But hopefully it's done with the customer in mind, the customer focus, so the customer is on top. So we're going back to the service triangle that we've talked about before, and here we were inverting it. Okay, so here what you see on top is the interactive marketing, delivering the promise. The providers and the customers, right? The providers and the customers, the employees, if you will, and the customers. The ability to interact with the customers, that's critical. So in order to make that happen, you have to have strong internal marketing, enabling the promise, if you will. In other words, we have to be sure that our employees are delivering what we think is what we want, and they agree and they feel that it's the right way to go for them too. And then we have to externally market that with the customers themselves. So we have to make the promise. In other words, we have to say to the customers, this is what we do when something goes wrong. That's what we do when something goes wrong. Now, going back to our Ritz-Carlton examples, we've talked about a couple of these before, back when we were talking about an earlier aspect of the service recovery. But here we're talking about the empowerment process for customer complaints, which is essentially the same thing, but we're looking at the Ritz-Carlton philosophy. So Ritz-Carlton, you give a warm welcome, you anticipate compliance. If the employee senses the guest's wish or need, then the employee breaks away from the routine and they apply immediate positive action and they determine a guest reaction, right? And if the guest reaction is favorable, it's a fond farewell, and then you document it and you put it into place the routine duties and the guest memory system that the system has itself. Now, there's a key element to this. Before, if you may remember back, it may be a couple of weeks ago now, but when I talked about Disney, I said they like to document everything. Well, in the case of Ritz-Carlton, they do not want to track the dollar amounts. They truly don't. They give a $2,000, it used to be $2,000, it's probably a little higher than that now, limit to the employee to make the right choice. And from my experience in talking to people within the Ritz-Carlton system, the employee typically gives less than that. So it's giving them the ability to make the decision and then report back what the decision was. Not look at it in terms of, let's see how much that cost us. But instead, on the other perspective, looking about how that affects our long-term value. Now, one of the questions we might ask here is, does this work in all environments? In fact, one of my questions at an early stage of the development of Ritz-Carlton in mainland China was, is this system possible in working there, where you have more of a top-down type of a management approach based on the way the government is structured and the ownership is typically structured on things. So can you make this happen? Can you empower the employees? So I asked the general manager, she was the general manager a number of years ago at the Ritz-Carlton in Guangzhou, which was opening at that period of time. Can you do this? And she said, absolutely. And in fact, she followed that up. We were at a conference together where she was a speaker and I was a speaker. She followed that up with a presentation on exactly how they did it. So I think this is a viable system in all scenarios. I don't think this is something that doesn't work because perhaps the employee doesn't feel that they can make decisions. It's about how upper management gives them the ability to actually do it. And you'll hear more about that. Going back, this is a video we'll actually use 3 different times here because I thought it was such a great interview in the process from a Ritz-Carlton human resource person from Dubai. And if you go from minute 3:30 to minute 5:40, she talks about the whole aspect of empowerment and teamwork. Four Seasons has what they call the Lead with Care program for their response to COVID-19. So getting more specific, the Lead with Care, so it says it's training to build on Four Seasons legacy and a legendary service model rather, and it's the re-education, if you will, in terms of how to empower the employees to deliver enhanced health and safety programs with confidence. How do we make those kind of decisions at the employee level for what needs to be done? And they've created an advisory board then that ensures that employees have a well-informed understanding of the disease and how it's transmitted, right? So we want to make sure that the employee knows what's going on. And the whole thing is the last point makes here, is grounded in emotional intelligence. In other words, the employees being able to make the kind of decisions and do the kind of behaviors that you want to personalize the care to the customer, understanding what all of the changes have been and all the adjustments that need to make within COVID-19. So again, it's empowering employees to make that decision. The service element, not just the physical aspect as we've talked about before. Lack of teamwork. So we talked about empowerment, lack of teamwork. pulling together on a common goal. I'm going to let our group lead you in terms of a discussion about how you encourage teamwork. What have you seen? What works for you in that aspect? Now, once we've done all that, we've empowered, we've done the teamwork aspect, we have to be able to learn from our employees, is it working? How do we know whether these things are working internally now as the management? This is a Weston system of measuring associate experience. So what you see here is a framework, right? They're looking at the engagement first, okay? Are your associates proud to work for the business? So you're asking questions in employee level surveys about how they feel about being proud to work for the company. Number two is they have to enable. So do the associates have what they need to deliver to the guests? Again, you're surveying the employees to find out what they think. And this is where the teamwork, the leadership, work environment, information, all of that is in the enabled aspect. How do they feel about it? And then finally, the agility, okay? Are they aligned with and focused on your guests? Are they ready for the change? Are they looking toward the future, if you will? And how are they doing in today's environment, I'm sure, is an even more critical aspect of looking at the associate type experience. So ultimately, the takeaways from all this is you have to engage your employees and enable them to perform. You have to be agile in your practices. So you have to be able to make changes where it needs to be done and needs to be done at the level of the employee. And then you have to deliver on the brand promise where everything communicates to the customer. And we'll talk more about that when we get to Gap 4 in particular. And here are your discussion questions. Thanks. That should end another lecture for us.